Welcome to the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Rosensweet, mom of 3 young people, peaceful parenting coach, and your cheerleader and guide on all things parenting. Each week, we'll cover the tools, strategies, and support you need to end the yelling and power struggles and encourage your kids to listen and cooperate so that you can enjoy your family time. I'm happy to say we have a great relationship with our 3 kids. The teen years have been easy and joyful, not because we're special unicorns, but because my kids were raised with peaceful parenting. I've also helped so many parents just like you stop struggling and enjoy their kids again. I'm excited to be here with you today and bring you the insight and information you need to make your parenting journey a little more peaceful. Let's dive into this week's conversation. Hey all, welcome back to another episode of the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. Before we dive in today with our awesome guest, I want to ask you a favor. Can you please reach out to a friend or two and tell them about the podcast? Let's spread the word about peaceful parenting because we have it within our power to make the world a better place, one family at a time. I'm so excited today to share this episode, this really wonderful conversation that I had with Janine Halloran about coping skills for kids. And this is such a good conversation with so many actionable strategies that you can take away and really use the next time your kid is having a hard time. Janine Halloran is a licensed mental health counselor who's been working with children, teens, and their families for 20 years. She's been helping children and teens build their coping skills throughout her career in a variety of settings, including schools, mental health clinics, and in her private practice. She's the author of several books, including the bestselling Coping Skills for Kids Workbook and the Coping Skills for Teens Workbook. Her work has been featured in the Boston Globe, CNN, and Huffington Post. Janine lives in Massachusetts with her husband and 2 children. All right, let's meet Janine. Hi, Janine. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. I'm really excited to be here.
Me too. I can't wait for you to share all of your wealth of knowledge with our listeners. Can you just tell everyone a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I am a licensed mental health counselor from Massachusetts, and I've been working with children, teens, and their families for about 20 years now. And so I am an individual therapist. That's my training. And I actually still do see kids in a private setting so that I'm their individual therapist and I help their families out when they're struggling with certain things. But the other thing that I do is I run a couple of businesses. I run Coping Skills for Kids, which is all about helping kids figure out how to deal with stress, anxiety, and anger in safe and healthy ways. And I run Encourage Play, which is all about helping kids learn social skills through play. So that keeps me pretty busy, pretty hopping, lots of products and resources and podcast episodes, all about that sort of stuff. But my first love is being a therapist, working one-on-one with kids, talking about anxiety, talking about stress, talking about how to handle when things get tough. So that is my first love. I really enjoy doing it and I will never stop probably.
I love that you get to keep doing both of those things because sometimes it's hard when you start a business that to keep doing the thing that brought you there because you get too busy with the other things.
Yeah, absolutely. And my husband was so funny. He was like, I took on a couple new clients recently. He's like, why are you taking on more clients? And I was like, because I miss it. And a couple of my clients graduated. And I'd love to work with some new families. So I can't not do it. It brings me such happiness and such joy that I very much enjoy it. So, and it keeps me fresh and honest. So, I was a therapist through COVID, so I saw kids remotely. I understand that challenge.
Yeah. And also you're the boss, so you can do whatever you want to do.
I know, right? I can do it if I want to. I don't understand. It impacts
You're not the boss of me.
It just impacts our after school schedule. And that's, I think, why he was like, because I see kids. So it's the perfect time to see them is after school. But we also have kids. So we have to manage, like, are you going to go to this place? Who has band? Who has soccer? Who has blah, blah, blah. So I understand why you're saying that. I was like, but I got this. We're good.
Yeah, we're like so like keeping it real here with like the mom and the business struggles, right? Like the family, just like everyone listening. Okay, so I wanted to talk today about coping strategies. I know that you mentioned that's one of your branches of your business, coping strategies for kids. Before we get into what they are, what the coping strategies are, can you just briefly say like when you might use when do kids need coping strategies? Like is it in the moment of big feelings, or is it like during stressful situations or times of life, or all of the above, or what?
I would say all of the above. Anytime where kids are experiencing challenging feelings, big feelings, challenging situations, stress, anxiety, overwhelm, those are all times that kids can use coping skills and adults too. So I always try and make sure that kids know that, when you are having like a big feeling, you can do something. There's a strategy that you can use. If you are experiencing something that's really challenging at school and you don't know what's going on, you're feeling overwhelmed, there are things that you can do. I want to make sure that the kids that I work with feel empowered, and the kids that use the books that I create feel empowered to know I can do something when I'm having this big emotion, this big feeling, this big experience that's really overwhelming.
That's awesome. I love how you talk about empowering kids so that they know they have something to draw on when they're feeling upset or when they're, feeling stressed or angry. Can you go over the 5 types of coping strategies that you talk about? Because what I realize in my work, I think I lean really heavily on one of them, which you might guess is the processing strategy. And it was so helpful for me to learn from you. I've been really listening to your podcast the last couple of days. Oh, there are all these other strategies too. So if you could just go over the 5 types of strategies and maybe give an example or two from each one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you just a quick story about how it sort of came to be that I started doing this, because I was working with a group of preteen girls. So, you get out of graduate school and you have this like list of like 101 ways to deal with stress, right? And this one particular memorable young lady said to me, this is too long. I have no idea where to begin. I have no idea where to start. And I said, that is fair feedback. You know what I mean? And I'm hearing that. So let's talk about how we can sort of divide it up. So it started then in that moment in that room with those kids. And so it sort of came organically, but then over time, there are this different things that I noticed, different strategies that, could fall into these like 5 sort of styles is what I call them. But the categories are not hard and fast. So like somebody could have something that's a relaxation strategy, but it's also a distraction strategy. So the 5 that I talk about are relaxation, distraction, movement, sensory, and processing. So relaxation, I always think of those as the ones that we typically think about when we're like, calm down. So making sure that you are taking deep breaths, like trying different ways of taking deep breaths, doing a progressive muscle relaxation, relaxing your body, doing a grounding technique so you're like aware of the present moment, mindfulness. All of those sorts of strategies fall into what I think of as relaxation. Distraction is all about play and fun activities. So that would be playing a board game or building something with Legos or doing arts and crafts. So I think about those as distraction, reading a book. In terms of movement, that could be like sort of big body movement where you're like jumping and skipping or running or taking a walk, or small body movement where you're squeezing a stress ball or popping bubble wrap. And then sensory, I think of not only your 5 senses that you think about, but also, for those kids who might be struggling in terms of sensory processing or sensory issues, I think about like how your body moves in space, if you need heavy work, that sort of thing. So I think about using your sense of smell and, potentially using your sense of, balance, spinning around, hanging upside down, getting into something tight, squeezing your body tight. So all those sorts of things are things that fall into that sensory category. And then processing, which is one of my favorites as a therapist, when we have to talk about our feelings and our behaviors, and we talk about, how it feels in your body. Where do you feel things in your body? What's your plan? What are you going to do the next time when something happens? So it's really that thoughtful, cerebral, like, let's get down to like real CBT, like, let's do the work in figuring out what, our connections between our thoughts, our behaviors, and our feelings.
Okay. For anyone who was like frantically trying to write down all of these strategies, I just want to say that Janine has an awesome checklist that has these strategies and so many more. And we will put a link to that in the show notes, and you can grab that checklist. Before we actually talk about how to use the checklist, because that's what I want to talk about next, I just want to point out something that I've observed like in my own life and from working with parents is that these strategies, and tell me what you think about this, but I find these strategies only work if a child wants to calm down. And so I think, like, what I always say is nobody wants to calm down until they feel understood, until they feel empathized with, until they feel like, that we're not just trying to like quiet them down so that our life is easier, right? So often I find parents fall into using these types of strategies too quickly before they've acknowledged a child's feelings. And so it's kind of, I always say, like, imagine you're really upset about something that your partner did and they just said, okay, take a deep breath, Janine. Like you would feel, but I just want to point that out, that I think that what makes people want to calm down is when they feel understood. And then that's when we can offer the strategies. Is that what you find in your work?
I do. I find that you really want to make kids feel heard and seen. And it can be as simple as I'm seeing that you're upset right now, or I see you. What's happening? Can you
Hmm.
tell me what you're feeling right now? So that they know, like, I'm not just trying to like hush you and put you to the side. I see something is wrong and it's really bothering you. And maybe for an adult, it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but for a kid, it's a really huge deal. And so I want to acknowledge that and then be able to help them pick a strategy that they can use. And the other thing I always like to say is like, trying a new strategy when a kid is escalated is also not a great call because they can't do any hearing and learning when they're in that fight, flight, or freeze mode. They really need to be in a calm place. So I like to practice strategies when kids are calm, and that always feels weird, I think, when I say that sometimes. But
No, it makes so much sense because, as you said, the thinking part of their brain has gone offline,
yeah,
and they're like reacting from that fight, flight, or freeze. And you're drawing on a coping strategy is asking them to engage their thinking brain, right? So
yeah.
you have to maybe even practice, maybe not even talk about it only, but like practice them when they're not upset.
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. You practice when they're not upset, and then they know what you're talking about. It's easier for them to recall it when they're upset if you've practiced it before, especially for younger ones. If you have a visual of it, it makes it so much easier for them to then be able to pick, oh, I'm going to do this strategy rather than hearing us say it out loud. Sometimes it's hard for them to hear the words when they are escalated. So it's easier for them to actually look at a visual.
Right. Okay. So talk to us about how to use the checklist.
Oh, sure. So in the checklist, the way that I like to use it is I like kids to check off the strategies that work for them. So it doesn't mean that they've used it when they've been upset. It's just a strategy that they use. So like, or something that they enjoy. So like reading a book. Do you like reading books? Check. That can be a strategy that you use. Do you like listening to music? Check. That can be a strategy. And then I want them to cross off the ones that they know don't work for them. That doesn't mean that it means that they have to have at least tried it once. You know, a lot of times when you work with kids in a group and or when you work with kids in schools or just even talking with your own children, like they would be very easily tempted to just cross off all of them. They're like, nope, 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 nope. So I sort of preempt that and I say you have to have at least tried it once. If not, if you're not interested in trying it, that's one thing. But like if you haven't ever tried it, please don't cross it off yet. And then the other part of that, so I check off the ones that work, cross off the ones that don't, and circle the ones that you want to try because those are strategies that might be something that you want to add to your coping skills toolbox. So thinking about like adding more skills so kids can be able to deal with any emotion, any situation, wherever they are. I like to give lots of choices.
That's so great. So what I like about your coping strategies and addressing like all of the different, the relaxing, distracting, the sensory stuff and the checklist combined is that it's very personalized because all of our nervous systems are so different, right? And that something that's really calming to you could be agitating to me and vice versa. And so I love that it's just like really getting to know your child's nervous system or your student or whoever you're working with, getting to know their particular nervous system and what works for them. And I think that's really great because sometimes, I've heard that for some people, deep breathing makes them feel more anxious, right? So that's something you always hear, like take a deep breath, do some deep breaths. But for some people, that actually makes it worse.
Yep. Absolutely. And thinking through different ways of taking deep breaths because like as I sort of have a little bit of asthmatic lungs. So sometimes taking those like deep breaths, I doesn't feel good. it just doesn't, like, my lungs don't work that way.
Hmm.
So I like to try and come up with different things that kids can do to take breaths, and it doesn't have to be like this extreme deep, like 8-second breath, because that sometimes doesn't feel great for people. So it's all very highly individualized, and there's beauty in that, because then you recognize the human and the individual in front of you. But it can be a little bit challenging if you've got multiple kids or multiple students or multiple clients, and how do
Hmm.
you help them all figure them out?
Well, that leads me to my next question is, so once you've gone over the checklist with your child and you've got the checked things and the things that definitely might work and then the things that we might try, how do you help a child go back to that list when they are dysregulated? Like, I assume you don't pull out the actual list, or maybe you do. I don't know.
No, you know what I do? To make it a little bit easier on myself, I actually do have like a my coping skills, and it's actually part of the free download. A my coping skills sheet where people can actually write down all the skills that work, and then write down the skills to try. So for me, it's like a cheat sheet for me, not necessarily something that I would pull out for the child, but it does help me sort of keep in mind, like, these are the things that we had talked about being those, like, things that are going to work. What I would do when the child is calm, I would go through them and with the child and say, well, which ones are your favorites? Which ones do you think that you would want to, like, have as your go-to strategies to use when you're having a hard time? And once we have like 3 to 5 of those, I would actually either make a visual or write down like the strategy on a piece of paper, on like index cards, and put it in a place where they can access it if they need to, especially for like preschool, elementary kids. If they have a visual, it can be really helpful, so that instead of you saying, why don't you try doing the progressive muscle relaxation, they know where to go, or you can point to, and then just without any words, just point to it and see what their thoughts are on it and see if they want to try it.
That also probably would, like, not make it a power struggle where you're telling them what to do, right? You're just referring them to the thing that they had already decided might be helpful for them.
Right. And that's why I like to give 3 choices, because then it's also not like, well, you have to do this one and
Mhm.
this is your only choice. Like, no, you have choices in front of you. Not too many to be overwhelming, but you can choose. What do you think would feel good in your body right now?
So I'm gonna be difficult and say, like, what do
Mhm.
you do when a kid is saying, "No, I won't do any of those," and they're still upset and really dysregulated and having a big meltdown?
Then that's when you bring your own coping skills to the front. Seriously, because it's very easy to escalate when a kid is refusing to do it. I don't want to get into a power struggle. They are not, their brains aren't online at that point.
Mhm.
There is no, it's not a teachable moment. It's not a thinking opportunity at that moment. I just want to help them sort of ride it out. And if that means me stepping away and taking my own breaths and trying to remember that I need to be the thermostat and not the thermometer, I'm not
Yeah,
going up and down with them.
I
I'm
love that.
staying calm. I'm going to stay calm. I'm setting the tone. And when they're ready, because it doesn't last forever, even if it lasts 2 hours, it will stop
Yeah.
eventually.
Yeah. So you're talking about bringing the calm, being the anchor. I love that you're the thermostat, not the thermometer. And really, because our nervous systems are always talking to each other's nervous systems, and if we're getting elevated, they're not going to have anything to hold on to ground themselves.
Yep.
Yeah,
And that one, I always think about, it's never just one opportunity that you have to work through and help a child when they are struggling. There will be more. Don't you worry.
yeah, exactly. Is there anything you suggest for after the child's used the coping strategy?
After they've used it, I like to just check in and see how it went. I like to
Mhm.
say, like, how did that feel in your body? Did you enjoy that one? Is there a different one that you think you might enjoy better? Like, just to process what happened. I think it's really helpful to do some reflection with a child after things have calmed down, because a lot of times they can tell you a little bit more information than you think that they'll be able to tell you. So I like to have that processing time with a child.
That's also, like, reinforcing that, maybe they'll be more likely to wanna try it again the next time if you've, like, built the brain pathways of, like, how did that work for you and getting them to reflect on it. Let's change gears a little bit to another resource that I learned about from you, and maybe you could explain it for the listeners, the Feelings Thermometer. And this is also a download on your website.
Yeah. I love the feelings thermometer because what it can help you do is really explore the different sizes of emotions that you have. So I actually I used the thermometer with a newer client of mine the other day, and it was all about his anxiety. So we talked about, what does your anxiety look like when it's just a tiny bit of anxiety? What does it look like when you're medium sized anxiety? And what does it look like when it's really big and overwhelming? And what's interesting is, when you do this activity with kids, sometimes they can't say all of the things. Like, it's not a one and done kind of like worksheet where, we're going to go through and we're going to be able to explain everything all at one point. It's not necessarily how it works, but it gives us a way to start having the conversation about, what do you notice in your body? What do you notice about what your actions are? How do you react? How do you respond when you feel this sort of feeling? And then, so that's on one side, like, what do you look like? What are the things that you do? And then, what are my coping skills? What are my strategies that I can use? So when I'm just a little bit anxious, I can do these things. Like, I can go outside and I can run around. When I'm medium sized anxious, I can go up to my room, or I could take a drink of water. When I'm big anxious, maybe I try a grounding activity. Maybe I try something that has to do with mindfulness. So it can give you a quick sort of picture of, what does it look like when somebody feels a certain way, and what are the strategies you can do. It sort of pulls it all together, and then you can color it in. You can give kids some ownership of it, because they can pick which color to color the thermometer, so they really feel like part of it. And you can always come back and revisit. So I used it with one of my clients who's now a senior. Sorry, she's a freshman in college now. And we talked about, like, her feelings thermometer her anxiety thermometer when she was younger. And now, looking at it now, it looks very different. Like, we didn't go through it because she's like a college freshman. Like, I'm not going to do that with her. But, like, just talking through those strategies with her, she's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I used to do that. And it's just really, and like, oh, this is another strategy that really works for me. And I like, that would go there now. So it's
That's so
interesting.
cool.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing I like about the feelings thermometer is that I think a lot of times, I was going to say kids, but I don't think it's just kids, can't tell when they're getting elevated or when they're getting dysregulated. They don't recognize the signs in their bodies, the warning signs, right? Like the zones of regulation. I think part of that, that's another strategy. And they teach kids to recognize, like, oh, my hands are starting to clench, because often it looks like 0 to 100, but there really are warning signs in between. And that's sort of what I took also from your feelings thermometer, is that it's teaching kids to recognize when they're just on the small end before they get to the big end.
Yes, absolutely. And that there's a piece of, like, just understanding and recognizing your feelings, but then there's also this other piece of, like, recognizing the size of feelings that is really helpful for kids.
And so that's something that you think parents can do with their kids, or do you think that's more like a therapy exercise?
I know parents have used it with their kids. When I use it as a therapist, I give the copy of it to the parents so that they have it. So some of my kids, like, have it in their room, so
hmm
they can refer to it, or their families can refer to it and say, "Oh, I'm noticing this. So let's look at some of those strategies that are over here."
And would you say, like, where are you on your feelings thermometer? Is that something you would like maybe ask your child?
I think that I might say, like, what's going on? Where are you? How big is this emotion? How big is it feeling for you right now? Yeah, I would say that. I've said that, actually.
Uh-huh. And maybe we can do it for ourselves too.
Yep.
So I'm going to switch gears a little bit here, because I know that one of the other branches of your work is around play and social skills for kids. And I know I've been hearing a lot of parents talking about, especially, I don't know what it's like where you live, but in September, when kids went back to school in September, for many of them had been more than a year since they were in school. And some of them had even never been in school because of the pandemic. They missed out on those first year or two of preschool, kindergarten. And parents are talking about how they're worried their kids don't know how to make friends, or they don't know how to interact with each other. Is that something that you've been seeing?
Yes, absolutely. I have been seeing it and I've been hearing it. And not just with kids, I think even those of us as adults who are struggling with just re entering the world in a way. Like, I've been hearing more and more stories anecdotally about adult friends of mine, adult colleagues who are like, I just didn't want to go to the party. I just
Oh
didn't
my
know if I
gosh,
could handle it.
I'm not the only one.
Yeah, like, I don't know if I can make it to Stop and Shop today. Like, it's really hard.
Yeah. So what are your tips for parents if they, have kids who haven't been having that practice or haven't been out in the social world?
So I would say it's a great time to start having some really small play dates. And I mean like one-on-one play dates, because the more kids you have at a play date, the more complicated the group dynamic can get. But if you just have one child and it's with your child, it makes it a little bit easier for them to practice those turn taking, cooperation, working together skills that they need to practice. And that's the basis of making sure that they are being able to be friendly with people. I would say having play dates and just allowing for time for play, because play is how kids learn. Play is how kids relieve stress. Play is how they learn to self-regulate. Play is how they learn to interact with one another. So giving them an opportunity to have time to play in a structured environment, and it's kind of nice as people are getting vaccinated, but if you can be outside and that feels more comfortable, like, to make sure that you're having some opportunities to actually get kids together to practice those skills. And it's nice that they are back in school. Here we were out of school for an entire over a year as well. So my kids were remote schooling from March, and then we actually did a full year of remote school at home. Especially for like the older kids, middle school, high school as well, getting them into clubs, having them interact at clubs more, now that we're back, is, I think, fantastic. Being able to find some ways, find opportunities for them to join and be part of a group. So whether that's sports or music or dance or something where they get a chance to do some interaction, but then making sure that they also have some downtime, because it can be very overwhelming if their schedule is filled after not having anything. So to ease back in, take it slowly. You don't have to fill your entire calendar. You can have some downtime. You can have some time where it's just you at home relaxing.
Well, and just to your point about play being the, really how children learn. I remember I've heard it's people say play is the work of childhood, right? And so we do need to make room for play and make sure that we're not, scheduling just because we can now, scheduling every afternoon and just having that downtime, that free time, free play time, creative time, time to be bored, time to, roll around on your bedroom carpet playing with your, Lego or dolls or whatever.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, this has been so informative. And I know that my listeners are they're going to run over to your website and get these downloads. And I know I'm going to also start sharing some of these ideas with the parents that I work with. Because as I said in the beginning, I tend to go more for the processing type of strategy, but I can't forget about all of the others that are so important. Can you share with us the answer to this question that I ask all of my guests, which is, if you could go back to the day your oldest child was born and give yourself a piece of advice, something you wish you knew then that you know now, what would it be?
It's okay to make a plan, and it's okay if the plan does not go as expected.
I love that.
Because, as my birth with my first child was not easy or what I had planned, and what I anticipated life being as a mom for the first couple of months was not the way that I anticipated it, but it was still amazing and life-changing and glorious. And same with my second child, who was a completely different creature. It's so funny. They like came out in two different ways. But it's okay that it didn't go as you expected, and like just go with it, and it'll be okay. It's all right if it doesn't go to plan.
I love that. My husband gets annoyed with me because I always like to make plans like, okay, when are we going to go do this thing? And he's like, why do we have to plan everything? I'm like, you don't understand. I'm fine with changing the plan. Like, it's not that we have to make the plan and stick to it. I just like to have a plan, and then we can change it if we need to change it. But I hate having no plan at all.
Yep, I'm the same way. I like to plan too, but like sometimes I can get a little rigid, and I'm like, but that was my plan.
Yeah.
So it's nice to know, like, just be flexible about it. Like, you can
Yeah.
change the plan. Changes are okay.
Yeah, I honestly have absolutely no problem with changing the plan. I just don't like no plan at all. Yeah. All right, well, thank you so much, Janine. Can you tell the listeners where they can find you?
Sure, they can visit copingskillsforkids.com. That's where I do a lot of resources and I have a lot of information all about coping skills and strategies for deep breathing and things like that.
And your podcast?
And my podcast is over at JanineHalloran.com. So
Okay.
that's actually a great place if they just want to do like a deep dive into doing some listening. I try not to make the podcast episodes super, super long.
No, you have a bunch that are like 10 minutes long. I listened to a lot of them on my walk yesterday and today.
That's what I love doing. I've gotten the feedback, like I really like it because it's like I can listen to a couple on my way to work or on my way like dropping off or whatever. After drop off, I can come back and listen. But I've been doing some interviews as well. So those are a little bit longer. But I love the short format and I really enjoy podcasting. So it's a fun place to, it's a fun thing to do.
And it's called Calm and Collected Podcast, right?
Calm and Connected podcast.
Calm and Connected. Sorry, Calm and Connected. Save everyone a trip to your website if they just want to right now go into their podcast player while they're listening to this one and bookmark it. Thank you so much, Janine.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found this conversation insightful and exactly what you needed in this moment. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that I'm rooting for you. I see you out there showing up for your kids and doing the best you can. Sending hugs over the airwaves today. Hang in there. You've got this.